I must tell you there is a joke that doesn't become stale, and that is that to every Mesiba the Miyuchosim come late, and therefore to a Mesiba of the Tzatzoim everybody's a Miyuchos, so everyone comes late. But I'll tell you the secret why the story does not become stale. Because the Miyuchosim become bigger Miyuchosim every single year. Beluchim Aboim, for those who are here, and for those Miyuchosim who are going to come soon, they are going to come, they are going to miss it, and Beluchim Aboim to them as well, and to everyone. The Rebbe paid a lot of attention to this Melava Malke over the years, and in one Sichet, Tafshin Daled Mem, the Rebbe dedicated, not only gave us a Butel Mashke, but he dedicated a Sichet to the Tzatzoim, which is the proper thing to start with. First of all, it's a Sichet of the Rebbe, and then it shows the Meile of each of the Tzatzoim. The Rebbe brings that the Alter Rebbe writes in the Alter Rebbe in Siddur writes the Nusach v'niya anachnu v'tzetzoenu. And there are many nuschois. Some nuschois are v'niya anachnu v'tzetzoenu v'tzetzoi tzetzoenu. The Alter Rebbe does not say v'tzetzoi tzetzoenu. The Alter Rebbe only says v'niya anachnu v'tzetzoenu. L'cheda he says less than the one that says in other Siddurim. But the Rebbe says the less is more. Because when you say v'niya anachnu v'tzetzoenu v'tzetzoi tzetzoenu, you're already going into counting. And how much are you counting? You're counting anachnu is one generation, v'tzetzoenu is another generation, v'tzetzoi tzetzoenu is a third generation. So you're only counting 3 generations. Whereas if you say v'niya anachnu v'tzetzoenu in one word, therefore it includes everyone. And then the Rebbe says something that's absolutely mind-boggling and heartwarming at the same time. The Rebbe says that in the word v'tzetzoenu, the Alter Rebbe put in b'nei memali mekemei, the Mital Rebbe, who's the memali mokim of the Alter Rebbe, together with each and every single one of the Tzatzoim in the same word. Which means every one of the Tzatzoim can proudly say that I am standing and you are standing, everyone, in the same word with the Mital Rebbe. In as much as this is special, this also means that there is something that we have to do to justify that kind of expression. I should also tell you the way the Melava Malka started, that it started on our own. We were figuring for years how should we do with the Tzatzoim of the Alter Rebbe, when should we do it? We did it different times of the year. As a matter of fact, the first time we did it was Halameet Sukkis, and so on. And then we had this idea, we're going to do a Melava Malka. We did a Melava Malka a few times, and then for whatever reason, it says not long ago, in Chumash as Chatoya Nimaskir, we stopped doing it, because making a Melava Malka is work, it's effort, it's money, and we stopped doing it for whatever reason. Then helped the Rebbe, there's a younger monk from Eretz Yisrael, Yizochet Letev. His name is Mordechai, and he lives in Tzfas. Mordechai Halpern, he lives in Tzfas, and for a while he was the Rosh Ha'ir of Tzfas. So Mordechai Halpern comes here in Tevis, and he asks around, is there a Melava Malka for the Tzatzoim? He asks, nobody knows, we don't know, we didn't hear, we don't know. So he sits down, and he sends off a letter to the Rebbe himself. And he writes to the Rebbe, I came to New York, I expected there should be a Melava Malka, there's no Melava Malka of the Tzatzoim, what's going on? And the Rebbe answers him, and they showed me the answer, that he should talk to me, and ask me to do a Melava Malka. And then the Rebbe writes these words, Uvitirutz leishtamit, b'im afilu yihi yatirutz amiti. Which means with a tirutz, he's not going to get out of it, even if it would be a real tirutz. So since then, I'm not looking for the tirutz, and Baruch Hashem, since then we have it every year. And thank you, Baruch Hashem, thank you for coming. And we thank the Rebbe because of the Rebbe, that we have to make sure that we have Amalav Malkev Tzatzoyim each and every single year, Gesundheit und Freilichkeit. I want to wish everyone that the schus of the Alter Rebbe should be making in everything that all the Tzatzoyim need, in everything Achinu ben Yisrael need. Bevone Chayim Zeine Leviche. Bone means children, and Nachas from children, and children from children, and Shidduchim from children. Everything that comes with it. Chayim means life, and the extension of life. Good health and everything that comes with it. We know good sustenance, good parnosa. And especially, including the Tzatzoyim, and as the Rebbe says all the time, of Kulam Leviche, Gesundheit und Freilichkeit, Tekef umiyad mamish. One of the specialties of the Malava Malke is that we sing all the Nigunim of the Alter Rebbe. And Baruch Hashem, we have with us two wonderful, wonderful individuals. One is Choni Mileki. Choni's name is Elchanan, and he's named after the Elchanan Morozov, right? And the Rebbe, and it's known by Chassidim that the Rebbe Nishmos said not ausgelernt, the Elchanan Morozov, the 10 Nigunim von Alten Rebbe. The Rebbe Nishmos said taught the Choni Morozov, the 10 Nigunim of the Alter Rebbe. So here, this is a special connection to the Chonim Morozov. And the one who is going to sing it with him, Emir Hashem, is the Yosef Zirkin, who is the son of the Yitzchak Zirkin. The Yitzchak Zirkin used to come every year to the Tzatzoyim, Yisochet Letev, and he was the son-in-law of the legendary the Yitzchak Groner. So therefore it's all in the family, and they are going to start. To put us in the mood, they're going to start with 3 Nigunim. That's the settle they gave me. Keiliyato, Avinu Malkeinu, and Ke'ayol Taleg. Thank you so much. Thank you very, very much, Rabbi Yosef Zirkin. This is only the first 3 Nigunim, and Memirat Hashem soon to come more. Our next speaker is not upon him Chadash's Baruch Hashem, he comes every year, but tonight he made a special effort. He spent Shabbos in Lakewood. There's a Jewish community in Lakewood, but he came all the way from Lakewood tonight, and we're so happy that he's here. The B'Shem Yedekeach is an Einikel from Alten Rebbe, probably 12 ways. We only know a few ways, but the main way that we know that he's an Einikel of Rabbi Yitzchak of Avluch. The Yitzchak of Avluch, the Frierdiker Rebbe is named after him, and his grandmother was a cousin to the Rebbetzin Stern Soda. Because of that, their family was very, very close with the Rebbetzin Chaya Mushke. Shemi, it's a pleasure to welcome you every year and tonight, and we know you always have some nice stories and some good things to tell us. Our cousin, Shemi Yedekeach, please.
It's mamish a geschmack whenever I come home to Crown Heights and to be tzvishin achai v'reyai. And I don't take this title achai v'reyai lightly, because the emissaries, everyone sitting here tonight, are proud einiklach of the Alter Rebbe. Kiluni b'nai ish echad, we're all einiklach from the Balatanyas Chesed ben Alayni. So when I say achai v'rei, I mean it. So before I start, I think it's appropriate. I should have done this many years ago, but I think tonight we can machen a schule. I'd like to give a tremendous akuras atoy, to show akuras atoy for somebody who's uisik b'tzorchet tzibah b'amina ständig, somebody who gives himself the me'oidoi, the nafshoi, Chol Dover Shebegedisha, Befrat and Yuna Chabad, and especially this Malav Malka that has been going on for years. I think we should all give a round of applause to the Shmuel, Yashakoyot, for all the avoidance that we've done all these years with Shmuel. Shmuel, das Chis von der Seite, der Balkan soll Megen sein, wir merit Yoshe for you and Mishpuche, Bechol in Yunim, Berachmi, Begashmi, Bechol Dover Toiv. I also think I'm sitting with my family members at this table, and I think it's also appropriate to mention a loss. Somebody is missing here tonight. I mean, we've been on hiatus. We haven't been together last year. But somebody that was larger than life, that graced this Lav Malka every single year, and he was Yad Yamin to the Rebbe, Tchitin, dann avoid the Kodesh zusammen mit der Rebbe. And the label was here every year, and he made a geschmack. And I looked forward to hearing the Maisias and support him. But the label, the man, somebody's talking about my grandma, they talk about the common unit, but the label made this very geschmack. And we miss him. But the truth is, I saw in the Sefer, very interesting, that a person who's zoicha to be meshabesh b'kodesh at tzaddik in this world is zoicha to be meshabesh b'kodesh of the oila emes. So I'm sure the label is right now being meshabesh b'kodesh the Rebbe, and he's looking down, he's being melit yosh for his mishpacha, and Allah zah yedid v'zitzen du ham tanach. The label is in aliyah. Now on a lighter note, I get a mazel tov that a few weeks ago my son had a baby girl. And she was born on a Sunday. And by us, I spoke to Shmuel and Chabad. Also, the minhag is we give the name for the girl with the first Kriyas of Torah. So the baby was born on Sunday. And my son, Sunday night, calls me and goes, Tati, I'd like to speak to you about the name. I think I really want to have the schis to give the name Chaya Mushka. And I was so happy. I was mamash, Azah, Simcha. And by the way, now we know there's thousands of Chaya Mushkas, Baruch Hashem. But in the Mishpucha, in the Nunt Mishpucha, I think with the first I gave Azah Num Chaya Mushka. And Grad, you should just know, when my father, my younger sister Sterna, when she was born, we went to the Rebbe as a family the first time after she was born. The first thing the Rebbe said to my father when we came in, he says, that he was so happy that the family gave a name, the Baal Tanya's Rebbetzin, gefreit. So, Baruch Hashem, noch a Chaya Mushka Rekeach, but it's interesting. I only found out Achemaisu. The baby was born on Sunday. We gave the Baruch Hashem the name Monday. Monday I went to the Rebbe and the Rebbetzin to give a Persönliche Mazel Tov. And on Tuesday, my cousin, Reb Sru Schnerzen, calls me from Eretz HaKodesh. He says, Shemi, Mazel Tov, Bechal, the Numen. Because, when is this kind geboren? When was the child born? I said, Ches Tevis, Sunday. Because, the Weiss Women's Youth Talk in Ches Tevis? I go, no. Because, the Baba Chaya Mushka, that's a Machzadik Rebbetzin. So they say the fact that the father and mother have the koyach, the kleine nevuah, to give a name, Baruch Hashem, Stabshaf, so alle zijn nachis from the kleine Chaya Mushka, from alle Chaya Mushkas. And I want to talk a bit, the Indian, Reb Shmuel, you talked about this Svardas from Tza'tza'im. I just want everybody here to know how chushev it was by the Rebbe that this Tzazamen came from the Alter Rebbe. That when I was a child, probably going back to Tovshin Lamed Vov, Lamed Zayin, the Rebbe called my grandmother, and she said, she called my grandmother, and she said, the Rebbe asked her to call, and he says he wants the Einiglich to come to this Tzazamen came from the Tza'tza'im, and he says it's important, it's appropriate, and it's a good Azach was all coming to the Tza'tza'im. So I remember, I was a little child, I remember, Shmuel Gefiert Azach, Reb Leibel was there, Reb Leibel's brother from Australia, das Gedenke had gemacht, the ganze. But we saw by the Rebbe, it's been achshivas for all of us, to be by this Malav Malch, it's been achshivas. So Baruch Hashem, I have this here for many years to talk my personal recollections of the Rebbe and the Rebbetzin. Now most of the years I've spoken, I've discussed Maisias and Sipurim from the Rebbe, Tzitkias, the Rebbe's Kedusha, Nisim. And then one year I said, we cannot emulate the Rebbe's Großkeit. But I said, one year I decided one thing we can emulate the Rebbe's Midas Toivus. So one year I discussed what's highest the Rebbe's Midas Toivus we can mach noch. But this year I'd like to turn it on its head a bissel and to continue what Reb Shmuel said. We're here. This is a very exclusive club. This is a very by invitation only, a VIP, Einiklach, the Nanshal Kadoshim. We can keep on going, right? What does that mean? What does that mean? We get shishi, we get nachas kegel, we get shtit oivenum, but what's meint es an Einikl from the Alte Rebbe? So I discussed this once in the past, that scientists have discovered DNA. DNA that you mamish see in each person. You can see where he comes from, his father, his mother, his grandfather. You can mamish go back to Aaron HaKohen. You can see a person's nationality, where he comes from. So in In's DNA, we found out that by In's, all of the Tzatzoim, we have the DNA from the Alter Rebbe. So I said, so therefore it means when we do a mitzvah, it's not only us doing a mitzvah, it's the Alter Rebbe Alliance doing a mitzvah. When we're doing anything that we do, it's the Alter Rebbe sitting there. So let's take that one step further. Not only is the Alter Rebbe with us, that he's doing with us this mitzvah, Maasam Tovim, I believe, and I think the oil maybe agrees with me, to be an Einikl from the Alter Rebbe is a call, is it an achrayus, that we have a special obligation to do more and lead by example and show. And not only, I just said that the Alter Rebbe lit by ins, but if the Alter Rebbe, we know that the Rebbe always verlangt, if he had 100, he wants 200. He has 200, he wants 400. The Rebbe eigentlich verlangt mehr. So us, this special VIP club, we have it within us. First we have to demand upon ourselves, bein beruchni, our davening, was heißt davening, darf davening noch besser. Begashmi, ben on the chaveroi, noch mit der Geschmack. And not only do we have to verlang from ourselves, we have the choilus, because the Alter Rebbe lit mitins. I just want to tell you the oil also. By the Rebbe, this was a title to say the Alter Rebbe is an Einikl. Been a große Sache. The Rebbe, we all know how close the Rebbe was to the Rebbetzin and what the Rebbetzin meant to the Rebbe. And the Rebbetzin took care of the Rebbe. Mamish, she was his whole life, and she mamish took care of the Rebbe. And when the Rebbetzin was nifter, the Rebbe acted differently on many Ifanim, but also the Gashmi. The Rebbe did not take care of himself physically, as when the Rebbetzin was there, she used to verlang from him to take care of himself. And no matter how close the non-dimension going to the Rebbe, nobody had the chitzvah to tell the Rebbe, like the Rebbe, the hair grew and the fingernail. Nobody had the chitzvah to tell the Rebbe, b'daf hazoytim. No matter how close you were, nobody had the chitzvah. But my grandmother had no qualms. She used to come to dollars, and she used to come to the Rebbe. Rebbe, who's the days? What's going on there? Your clothing, it's citizen. The Rebbe the Rebbe has to take a haircut. And the Rebbe used to smile, yeah. And he did it. Rebbetzin Sternberg, I don't know if she's here, she used to also tell, somebody has to tell the Rebbe.
Did the Rebbe mention the Chumale?
Oh, I know. So my grandmother had this, she was able to tell the Rebbe what he has to do. My grandmother was nifter, was gadon. My mother took that achrayus, that honor, and she went one time, she went to the Rebbe, and then my mother said to the Rebbe Azoi, the Rebbe get achting of Klal Yisrael, but the Rebbe darf achting geben auf sich hocher. The Rebbe takes care of the whole world, but the Rebbe can't forget about himself. The Rebbe has to take care of himself. So the Rebbe says, as Chumala heißt, ich darf sie folgen, weil sie der alte Rebbe is an Einikl. As Chumi says that I have to do this, I have to listen to her, because she's the alte Rebbe is an Einikl. So again, the Rebbe did not say, the Mittler Rebbe, the Tzabach Tzedek, Marash Zaplamanik, the Rosh Hashanah. He said, the alte Rebbe is an Einikl. Zog ich darf sie folgen. So the say, all of us here, we're all Einikl of the alte Rebbe. And those have the Rebbe gemeint. So the Eibusha helped him. I'm sure if we come out of this, not just with an ego trip where Einikl of the alte Rebbe, but we understand the obligation. What's meant to an Alter Rebbe and do more. We're gonna make a nachasriach b'shafa. We're gonna make a nachasriach for the Alter Rebbe. We're make a nachasriach for the Rebbe's chesed g'nalayni. The Eibische helfen in dem schrift that these new kabbalas, these new realization of obligation will bring the Gula Shlema or the Mashiach Tzadkeinu, the Mheru Imenu Mamash now.
Thank you very much, Shemi. I must tell you, some of the things you were going to say, Shemi, you said I was going to say myself. But Baruch Hashem, you said them, and you said them so wonderfully. Especially you mentioned Reb Leibel Groner. Baruch Hashem, he was here every time. And the Bashaint, Alamol, the Tzedzoim. And so there's an expression someplace. Shalom David Meis Mistam Avodah says, Ma kan neimidum shamish, af kan neimidum shamish. So B'meila, what you said is absolutely correct. We are going to continue with 3 nigunim, Likra Shabbos and Tzena Oreno and Keil Deidi. And after that we will have a special schus. We have a guest from Australia, Harav Tzvi Telsner, who is here, also for our Simcha. Mazel Tov, Zayim Shal Tevel Mutzlachas, Gesundheit und Fröhlichkeit, and soon we will have the schus to hear from Tzvi Telsner. First, Likra Shabbos, Tzena Oreno and Keil Deidi. Thank you so much. Thank you very much, Choni Mileki. Mir Hashem, soon more to come. Thank you very much to Yosef Zirkin, who sings so wonderfully, and it's an honor, and the Leil and Nishmas of his father, Yitzchak Zirkin, Olav Shalom, who used to come here every time for the Melave Malke of the Tza'atzoim. And talking about Yitzchak Zirkin, we have the honor of having a brother-in-law, also a son-in-law of the legendary Rabbi Yitzchak Roner, who was here with us, and we're going to ask him to say a few words. Rabbi Tzvi Telsner, all the way from Australia. Rabbi Tzvi Telsner, please.
Thank you, Rabbi Gutman, for the honor and the schus to speak here tonight. I remember coming to the first years of the Melave Malke, and in those years, the idea of traveling to Haditz and to be by the Alter Rebbe was a dream. There was a famous Dr. Zalman Gurevich from Montreal, once went to, I think he went to Haditz and these places, but he was one person. And to actually have someone who was there and saw, etc., etc. However, as the world changes, I was zeicha. This was, I think, at the end of the Nuns, when the Iron Curtain opened up, and I went for the first time to the cave of the Alter Rebbe in Haditz. We arrived at 2 o'clock in the morning. There was no electricity. There was no lights. Sigiven, achurve, you can't imagine. However, physically, it was taka achurve. But the ruchnis, the atmosphere, when we started saying the minor lotion and reading pidyenes, etc., was a very, very moving experience. And Baruch Hashem, since then, we have a minig in Melbourne that usually around Chayelul time, there's a group of Ingalite that go and visit all the Kfarim, the Alter Rebbe, the Mittler Rebbe, And they do it with great islahavas. It's a very interesting thing. You know, you're living in Australia. It's a very, very interesting place, as many people know. You've got plenty of lockdowns and other things I won't talk about. But that there should be in Galai, year after year, to go, it's a long schlep, and to travel the roads in Russia, those you may know are not the best. But when you come to the Alter Rebbe, it's a very, very moving experience. They fixed up the place. It's unbelievable. And to be with the Alter Rebbe, sit there, we had a Yingaman, it was an Alter Eid, and he came to the Alter Rebbe seeing, and he started saying Tillim. So he got to Tzadik Gimel. So he looks at the Tillim and said, Ni, Shinganig is hooked. And the man passed away at the age of 93. It was many years later. But the atmosphere, to be there and to daven there, we have the shul. And what was interesting, we were saying Tillim there, and there was a Yid, a Yerushalayim Yid, who was standing next to me. And he had a little kid was 7, 8. After we left the Yoyel, I went over to him, I said, Shalom Aleichem, you know, from where you from Zenter? And he tells me he's from Yerushalayim. Then I said, well, you know, you mind giving me your name? And he gives me a name, and for the first few seconds, it was a bit of a shock. It's like saying, I mean, there's from the Gronikis, from the Prushim, the last person who I would have thought would be by the Alter's Keber was this individual. And he says, he says, I come every year. So I thought to myself, it's a bit strange. From the Mamish, the Prushim, and not only that, his Zayda had a big fight with Reb Chaim Noah about Alter Rebbe's Manim. And he comes every year, he says, and if Chaim Tzimreb has letters of everything, Bar Mitzvahs and Pidyon Abens. You don't know what you can find in these places. Motzei Shabbos. I was talking today at the Sheva Broches, or last night. It was mentioned by the previous speaker about learning from the Midas from the Alter Rebbe. We all know that the Alter Rebbe was very close to Rabbi Yitzchak Berditchev, phenomenally close. I don't think we appreciate or understand the closeness of the Alter Rebbe to Rabbi Yitzchak Berditchev. Rabbi Yitzchak Berditchev passed away at the end of Chodesh Tishrei. I think it was Chof Aleph or Chof Beis. And the Alter Rebbe made a tour of the whole area, Berditchev and the whole area. Gekumen for Pesach. So the Almona of Rabbi Yitzchak Berditchev wrote the Alter Rebbe a letter and said to the Alter Rebbe, I've got no one to make for me a Seder. Now you ask yourself a question, Berditchev is quite a big city, those of you who have been to Berditchev. And there must have been some Jews in Berditchev who could have had to help the lady make a Seder. It's not, you know, it is like a rocket science, but that's like a halachas wissen. Oh, but she wrote to the Alter Rebbe. What did the Alter Rebbe do? He picked himself up and the ganze Mishpoche, and he went to Berditchev to Prava the Seder by the Almona of Rabbi Yitzchak Berditchev. Now when you think about it, what does it mean the Alter Rebbe going and leaving and traveling? And you ask yourself, what, I mean, you can't find somebody else? But the Alter Rebbe held that it was something important, and because of his unbelievable love of the Rabbi Yitzchak Berditchev, he went and he did it. Salachas kama v'kamo anoshim kerkeinu was certainly not on that madrega. And then there's another Inyan of the Alter Rebbe's Anivis. Story goes that the Alter Rebbe saw a whole group of Chassidim running towards his house. So he put himself on the floor and he was very upset. Was will they from mir? So his Rebbetzin was given a kluge Yidene, said, nein, they kommen nicht zu dir. They will hören, what du hast gehört von deinem Rebbe von Magid. They want to hear what you heard from the Magid. So the Rebbe said, so Midas Teves, we know what the Alter Rebbe, the Rebbe's famous story that the Rebbe used to tell over about him in Kippur. The Alter Rebbe took off his talis, the whole story which everyone knows. We have to learn the Midas of the Alter Rebbe, and that the Alter Rebbe this is spoil given from Gornished. You know, people come along, say pasnish, again, say dos. The Alter Rebbe knew it had to be done, so it was done. So the Rebbe to help that everybody we come to Chavdalat Tevis should be re-injected and re-infused with all the midas of the Alter Rebbe, especially those who are Rezeniklach, that carry, as the speaker said, the DNA of the Alter Rebbe, and the Alter Rebbe Zichem is Spalov as the alle, and them schus, the schus of Afotos of Mayonos, Shefutsu, Marisef, and Chutzu, as Amazecha Zayin, so the Gula Shlema B'Meir B'Yamein Amen.
Thank you very, very much. The Tzvi tells for the Vadim Avelta, talking about Yerushalayim Ir HaKodesh. Our next speaker has his roots in Yerushalayim Ir HaKodesh. Alav Shlomo Besser, the son of the Becheskel Besser, who had a special relationship, the Rebbetzin, and the Rebbe gave him certain shlichiyos to do. And he's an enikul of the Bedel Ludmir, from Yerushalayim Ir HaKodesh, who was an enikul of the Baba Melucha Rochel, the daughter of the Mitel Rebbe. It's our pleasure that Shlomo is here with us tonight, and he told me a story. When I spoke to him on the phone, he thought that everybody knew the story. I said maybe everybody knew the story, but I never heard the story, and it's an absolutely wonderful story. The Shlomo, if I can ask you to repeat that story, and I'm sure many of us did not hear that story yet. I love the Shlomo Besser, please.
A good Woche. Rav Shmuel asked me to repeat a story which I had mentioned to him last week. The only reason I mentioned the story to him is because Kedarko Bekoidish is a breite, is a gute, a fagina, Baruch Hashem. And he asked me to speak. And he was dogging a maisa. I said, I have no new stories. I can't pull out stories from my hat or whatever you call it. I just can't fabricate stories. And a story has to be accurate. Stam to Dom Tzipurim. Unfortunately, one of the maladies of our times today, that the media floods us up to a point that we can't take it anymore, with all kinds of sipurim coming from all kinds of sources, and many sources are not authorized, and they don't substantiate stories that you hear about G'dolei Yisrael. Chabad was especially very careful about the accuracy. Chassidim was very careful on the Maisa that you say over, especially about Nasim, about Tzadikim, that it has to be absolutely accurate. And therefore, this story came from me last week on the internet from two sources. I asked one source to verify, the one source from Eretz sent me the story, which I thought the whole world knew about. It's such a phenomenal story. Next day, he sends me a message, a recorded message, from a young man saying, in the Lashon Kodesh, אני שמעתי את הסיפור מכלי ראשון מהאדם שסיפר את הסיפור בדידה ועובדה. The Maisa goes like this. It's a first-person narrative, and for those people who read the story, for those who didn't read the story, it's definitely worthwhile. This young man says that he was brought up in France in an assimilated mishpacha. His father did not go to shul on Yom Kippur. The Zaydid never went to a shul. That was his introduction to life. When he was 25 years old, and he says also that most of the family intermarried, Rahman al-Islam. When he was 25 years old, he met a Nachriya, a Goyeta, and they decided to get married 6 months later. In other words, they decided that they will get married on a future date, which was 6 months later. In the interim, they're going to look for an apartment to share. And they went to a certain building, an address in Paris, and they came up with their suitcases. He with his suitcase, she with her suitcase. And as he entered the apartment and put down his suitcase in the foyer or in the salon, He said it in Hebrew, so I'm translating it to English. He got depressed. All of a sudden he felt depression on one hand, and he felt a certain jitteriness, nervousness. He just couldn't stand in one place. He didn't know what it is. He wasn't ill or anything. He was moving to an apartment. But something pushed him that he has to jump, he has to run. So he told her, I have to go out. He left his suitcase and he ran downstairs and he started running in the streets of Paris. He did not know where he was running to. And he wound up opening the door of a shul, wherever it was. It was a shul. He opened the door of a shul and there was davening. Sfaradish shul, Edus HaMizrach. The rabbi came over to him and asked him, can I help you? And the man answered, I want to pray. So he took out a siddur, in French of course, gave him as a siddur, and they were davening mincha, and he davened in French. He davened mincha along with the oilam. When they finished davening, he left the shul, ran back to the apartment, ran up the stairs, opened the door, and yelled at the woman over there, Achshav at yotzet, you're leaving now, you're leaving. And she looked at him incredulously, and she said, Ma kara? So he says, Lo kara, at yotzet, you're leaving now, that's it. She, all of a sudden, he took her suitcase, put her suitcase outside, and he said, out. And she left the apartment. He closed the door, locked the door. The next month he spent in the apartment. He couldn't sleep at night. There was something that made him very nervous, very uneasy. He went over to the landlord. He told the landlord, we made an agreement. I'm renting the apartment for 6 months. I'm giving you advance on 6 months, but I'm leaving. I'm not staying here. The same week, that's the way he narrates the story. The same week he went to Eretz Yisrael. He went to Tzfas. He wound up in Tzfas. Whether he came immediately to Tzfas, that's not, I don't know. But he wound up in Tzfas and became a Breslover in Tzfas. Fast forwarding, he was a married man with mishpacha. One day, he's going in Tzfas on the street, and he sees a maidah on the floor, rolling on the floor, some kind of announcement. And it says, and I guess it was either in Hebrew and in French, for all French-speaking citizens, Toshavei Tzfat, an evening with the Rebbe. An evening with the Rebbe. The Rebbe's life in France. And it's going to be an evening with the Rebbe, whatever date it was, I don't know what it was, whether it was Yud Nissen or another day of the Pagod, or whatever it was. He picked it up and he started reading it. He was interested. He turned it on the other side and it says an address, 3 addresses where the Rebbe lived in France. He looks at one address and he begins to shake. He realizes that this address is the same address that he lived in. As I get the Maisa, yeah, I see. Okay, but it took a while until it settled in. And he said to himself, if Taka the address where the Rebbe lived and I lived in that apartment, so the whole thing, it mamish made him very, very, very queasy. It means the Rebbe lived there 50, 60 years before I lived. And if anybody ruined my forthcoming marriage, it was the Rebbe. In other words, the Rebbe would make it out of it. But who should he ask? Who should he ask if this is Taka Emes? In other words, whom should he ask if this is Taka what happened? If this is the whole Malach Chabad. If I'm going to ask a Chabadnik, Avada to it's a Rebbe, Avada. So I want to ask a neutral person. I say, quote-unquote, neutral person. He went to Nahariya to speak to Rabbi David Achatzira. Rabbi David Achatzira is a big mekubal, ungenommen by Asach mentioned. And he told him over the Maisa, and Rabbi David Achatzira told him, do you know what Rebbe stands for? Reish Beis Yud, Rosh Bnei Yisrael. The touch from Rosh Bnei Yisrael is that the Rosh is concerned everything that the Guf does. Everything that bothers the Guf, anything malady that's wrong with the Guf, the Rosh feels. And that's a Rebbe. So the Rebbe felt what's going to be. Not the way, let me add something, as I get to myself, let me add something. Not the way you think. that the Rebbe took a dira in Paris to accommodate himself, his needs, the Rebbetzin, the enormous library. That's not why he took that dira. The Rebbe took a dira because the Rebbe saw many years before that one day the B'yayid was going through a difficult nisayon, and the Rebbe told him, "Gevoit aroy shleppen." He should not have these nisyonis. So the Rebbe moved to a certain apartment, a certain address, because that apartment will be a matzav, in a matzav, the Rebbe has to be metar years in advance. That's the way I read the story. I was very shaken and moved by the story, and therefore I asked my cousin, Yossi Ludner, who was one of the sources who sent me the Maisa, to verify, and he sent me the next day a recorded message from a person who says, "Hugar hayom begivat Shaul, ani shamati et hasipur mimenu, arbe anashim shamu, ani lo kalatati et zeh, but whoever decided to send it on the way, send it out. B'tov aleim bracha." I don't have to add anything to the story. The story speaks for itself. But the story, in a way, I think is so intimidating, it's so powerful, that Ayid Lakadovid Abu Chatzira, I think, speaks for all of us. The Rebbe did this in advance, 50, 60 years in advance. It's not a stam ma'ase. It's not, you just can't take a ma'ase like that and touch it. You can't. That the Rebbe took an address because many 50, 60, 70 years later there'll be a matzav, a certain situation where we'll have to do something about it. So Memela, the Rebbe left us an enormous legacy. But Memela, I think it talks to all of us. I think that each one of us has that nitzitz, has the possibility to carry over whatever the Rebbe did in a very different way. But just the machshava, just to go with such a machshava, it's something which it's very difficult for me sometimes to control, but to know that we experienced with the Rebbe, a Rebbe that has done so many things for the world, and he'll keep on doing things for the world, for all of us. We shall help and talk, we shall to say with our own eyes, שיצאים ערכנו בראשנו מת השם לגן סגור במהרה בימינו אמן.
Thank you very, very much, the Shlema Besser. I'm sure I'm not the only one who didn't hear the story before. An absolutely mind-boggling story. Thank you very, very much, Agadis and Yashakeach, especially when you brought the sources where the story comes from. We are now going to continue, and we have a surprise for you. After that, we have a speaker that is a Ponim Chadoshes, that never spoke for us before, and we are really looking forward to listening to him. First, we are going to hear B'nai Heicholo, then the Nigun Dveikes of Rosh Hashanah, and the Nigun Dveikes for Shabbos. Thank you so much.
Hey, hey, oh, Mama,
not finished. Thank you very, very much. I told you that we have a Ponim Chadoshes, but we did not have the schus until today to listen to, but Baruch Hashem, he is here today. Rabbi Naftali Citron, who was the Rav in the Karlbach Shul in the Upper West Side. He is a grandson of the Belechaim Karlbach, who was a twin brother to the Shlema Karlbach, and he's a great-grandson of the Shnei Zalman Shneason. And I want to tell you that his grandmother, Rebbetzin Adasa Karlbach, is here, and I'm so happy that she is here. I especially went into the Ezas Noshim, don't tell anybody, just to make sure that she is here. But she gave me a message. She said that in the olden days, when the Yitzchak Groner would speak, he would get the ladies to be quiet. So maybe I should do the same. So I want to make a public announcement that I cannot compare in any way to the Yitzchak Groner. What the Yitzchak Groner was able to do, no one was able to do. Nevertheless, since Rebbetzin Karlbach is asking for it, maybe we will get the attention of the ladies as well. And now we are going to hear from Malav Naftali Citron, please. Thank you very, very much. A great pleasure. Our cousin Naftali Citron.
Just wanted to first thank Reb Shmuel, Rabbi Butman. I consider him my uncle. He's not, but I think a lot of us consider him like an uncle because he brings this family together. Thank you, the whole Butman family. You should have Arichas Yamin, V'shanim Toivus, good health and nachas.
Amen.
This is a very esteemed room, so I'm humbled and really have no business being here. But I'm here anyway. Thank you for inviting me to share a little bit. But nothing is by accident. I happen to be a little more involved right now in learning the Torah of the Alter Rebbe. I'm always learning things like Tanya, but this year is the second year I'm learning Brachos Be'iyun. I give a shir on it, I type it up, I send it out to my Balabatim, and I never learned Iyun so long, Mon Masechta. First of all, it's an hour a week, don't get excited. Maybe it's 2 hours, maybe sometimes it's 10 hours if I have nothing else to do. In the beginning it was 10 hours, now it's 1 hour. But I'm going to be honest, the first thing that was my favorite on the Masechta was the shiurim of Rav Soloveitchik. Beautiful shiurim. But you know what my favorite pirush on brachas is now? Chelik Aleph of the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch. And I want to tell you a little secret. Brisker Chakiras didn't start in Brisk. They started with the Alter Rebbe. You see, I'm comparing notes. I'm looking at the notes of Rabbi Soloveitchik Shiurim. Beautiful. They're already in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch so many times. Mine to the point where I don't even have to look. I love the Rav, but I don't have to look anymore. I just go straight to the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch. People Pasha don't know that. To put it mildly, the first real derech halimud of what we have in the yeshiva world today is not coming from Brisk. It's coming from Chabad, it's coming from the Alter Rebbe. Okay. One other thing, and this is for the women in particular. The Alter Rebbe believed that you can't just tell people do a mitzvah, or even love HaKadosh Baruch Hu, or have faith in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but he believed that you should be able to explain how to love HaKadosh Baruch Hu, how to feel that He's close to you. And that was the whole way of Chabad Chasidus, is Tamu Uru'u Kitov Hashem. Taste and see that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is good. That's what the Maimarim, that's what Torah are, what the Kutei Torah. The whole goal is to be able to have a philosophy of the mind and the heart to understand Elokus, to understand holy things. And I want to tell a little story. I was in Australia. I was doing Bikur Bayis. I was a shliach in Melbourne. I was doing Bikur Bayis in the community of Rabbi Yurkovich. And, oh, you're here. So you can vouch for me. Okay. Ainical. So, one of the people I went to see says, I'm an atheist. I'm an atheist. Proud atheist. I had no idea why, but he was an intellectual, so he liked to talk to me. So I went through the Seder Hishtalshlus, I went through Atzilus, I sat for 2 hours talking to him about the Eilamus. He said, Dad, I believe. It's the craziest thing in the world. He didn't say he's an agnostic or that he has Sveikus and Amunah. He said, I'm an atheist. He doesn't believe in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But when I went through the Seder Hishtalshlus, I went Atzilus, Chachma Atzilus, all the way to Malchus Dasiya. He said, that I believe. That makes sense. Ever heard such a crazy thing? You know what it was? Very simple. He learned, there's a big man in the sky who sends out lightning bolts, something like that, and this he didn't believe in. When he heard what the Alter Rebbe, how the Alter Rebbe explains Tamar Ruki Tov Hashem, he says, this I believe in, that makes sense. So that's the second thing. If you meet someone and they say they're an atheist, first of all, they probably what they heard, they're talking atheist because they didn't hear anything interesting. So I'll tell you one thing. It's a lot of the West Siders are annoyed by the Israelis. No offense, the Israelis who have, as they're competing with the COVID testing booths to put on fill-in on Fridays. But if there's an American kid, even a 17-year-old kid who could speak English, and somebody actually wants to talk to them, the 17-year-old will tell a 50-year-old man something fascinating. Just from a 17-year-old learning Tanya, the 17-year-old has what to teach a 50-year-old intelligent man who has gone to college. And one more thing I'll leave you with, which is and this was already talked about before, the self-confidence of the Alter Rebbe. And we see that all over, but in two particular areas we see it. What are the two areas? We see it in regards to how within the Hasidic world he was confident that Hafatzas HaMayanos, and not just going out there and spreading Hasidus, but explaining Hasidus, giving it Hasbara was the way to go. Rabbi Avram of Kalisk and others were very upset about it. There are famous stories. We just remembered Yurtis Kislev, part of it, there was a Kitru about maybe the Alter Rebbe was doing too much. He needed the Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid to come and reassure him that he was doing good. So he had the self-confidence to do that, to stand up against his contemporaries, some of them older than him, and said, no, this is the way to do it. And of course against the Vilna Gaon, to not back down. I want to tell you I'll end with this little story. Not everyone knows this. Maybe you all know it, I didn't know that you know it. Everyone knows the Alter Rebbe went to meet with the Vilna Gaon. And the rumor is the Vilna Gaon went out the window, he didn't want to meet with the Alter Rebbe. But at some point, the Alter Rebbe sent a letter. Whether it got to the Vilna Gaon, I'm not sure if it even got to him. Maybe it never got to him, maybe it did. And the letter said like this: Dear Vilna Gaon, I'm aware of complaints that you have about the Hanhagas of the Hasidim, and I'm ready to do the following. Send a letter to me with all of the issues you have with Hasidus. And I have questions. however many issues you have, put them down in writing. I will respond to each and every issue you have. We'll make a packet of your questions with my answers, and we'll make copies of this packet, and we'll send them out to all the Rabbanim of Europe, Russia, anybody who's a serious Rav, not just the 5 people, 100, 200 Rabbanim. We'll send it to them. They'll read it, and they'll decide. If the majority of them is okay with Hasidus the way I responded, good. If not, your taina will be a taina. You know who wouldn't be afraid? Everyone knows the Vilna guy knew everything that there was to know. Who wouldn't be afraid to put something in writing and put it out there in what could be seen as a hostile territory? There were a lot of Hasidim, but there were plenty of Misnagdim more, and say, we'll let them decide whether Hasidus continues or not, or whether Chabad Hasidus continues or not. Only the Alter Rebbe. And that's because the Alter Rebbe had the Koyach HaTorah Al Pi Darchei Abal Shem Tov, which is, he knew, like the Vilna Gaon, he knew Kol HaTorah Kul also, but he also had the Daher of the Baal Shem Tov, of the refinement of the relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu that the Baal Shem Tov insisted that the Torah bring us into. And I'll just continue with one thing. That's why the Alter Rebbe says, if you help another Jew, Yasa Leiv and Nefesh, your mind will become 1,000 times more refined, because the goal is to connect to more than just yourself. And that's why we're here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Reb Naftali. I must tell you, we heard some things that we didn't hear before. Thank you very, very much. I believe we also got the ladies to listen. That's wonderful. Now they say, we have an individual that comes every year, and it's a pleasure that he is here with us tonight. Rabbi Dr. Ben-Zion Twersky always has something very interesting to tell us. Rabbi Dr. Ben-Zion Twersky is an anikel of the Ben-Zion of Bobav, the Kedushas Zion, and is an anikel of the Alter Rebbe many times. Rabbi Dr. Twersky, please.
I was recently thinking about what I could do. My father, as the Chayil Levach said, don't be mastered me. I don't want that. I figured, you know what, to write down Kedushay Torah, Leilu Nishmosai, is something that would make him happy. I know that I've shared with him Kedushay Torah before, and he was very happy to receive them. So I figured, you know what, I'm working on my Divrei Torah on Haggadah for Pesach, and it's an appropriate time now that we've begun reading in the Torah from Parshas Shmos with the beginning of Golus Mitzrayim and the lead up to Yitzias Mitzrayim. It's an appropriate time to engage in this. So I opened up the Haggadah and I was struck by the payat of Kama Malas Tovos, Dayenu. And some of the lines over there are a little bit interesting because there's clearly more to this payat than meets the eye. First of all, much of Magid, of the Haggadah, is a Mishnah in Masechta Psochim. The payat of Kama Malas Tovos is not there. And there's no resource that shows us that Kama Malas Tovos comes from Divrei Chazal. The Rambam doesn't bring it down. The Siddur from Reb Amram Gaon does, as well as the Siddur from Reb Sadia Gaon. So we know that the Payat is dated from Kadmainim. There are reams of Divrei Torah on the Payat of Kamamalas Taivas. The 15 levels are connected to 15 Shira Malasin from Tilim, and many other Cheshbainas, Al Pi Nigla, Al Pi Nista, Al Pi Chsidis, Al Pi Remez. There's much that's written on it. I'm not going to delve into the Torah's HaNista. I will leave that for people who have that expertise. But I wanted to taste a little bit of Pshat, what we're talking about. And there were two lines there that I found very fascinating. Ilu sipik tzachenu b'midbar arboim shona v'lo nosan lanu es hamon. As if the mon is separate from the tzachenu b'midbar. And then the next line was Ilu hechi lanu es hamon v'lo nosan lanu es ha-Shabbos. I just want to share with you the thought that I had, because I believe that what's Pashat Pshat is actually the Mahalach of Chassidus. The Sipek Zochenu B'Midbar Arba'im Shana refers to what? What was the needs that, in what way was the Eibishter fulfilling our needs in the Midbar? Our shoes never wore out. They didn't have to get their clothes cleaned, they were cleaned automatically. And Be'er Shel Miriam, there was a constant source in the supply of water. Now, these three things, Hagam, that there was Derech Nes, and everything was a Davar Ruchni, it was satisfying physical needs. I don't have a spiritual need for water. Torah, I have a spiritual need. Water itself, I don't have a spiritual need. It's a physical need. And so is clothing, and so is shoes, footwear. The Eibishter used Nes, he used the Dover Rachdi, a spiritual means of satisfying a physical need. Turn the page. But Hechilanu Esaman, what was the mon? The mon was Lachem Abirim. It's a posik in Tilim. Mon was a spiritual food. And the spiritual food, completely spiritual, satisfied physical hunger. People were hungry. Right? They even complained they were hungry. And the Eibishter says, but the mon had two other purposes to it. The mon had to exist from the time that it did, literally several days after Kriyas Yamsuf, because the Yidden needed to be lifted to the Madrega, that they would be able to be Mekabel Torah. Kabbalas Torah required the spiritual elevation, and the mon accomplished that for them. And after Matan Torah, they still needed that in order to be able to go into Eretz Yisrael. And once they were there, the mon stopped. There was no longer any need for it. So here you had the mon, which was a spiritual machal. The means of the nes was completely spiritual. It satisfied both the physical need, and it brought us to a higher level. What does Shabbos give us? There's reams and reams of Divrei Torah about the cheshivas of Shabbos, and particularly on this line, Shabbos is a very unique feature. Shabbos, we eat the finest macholim, the best challah, the best fish, the best kugel, the best chicken, the best macholim. What a Yid doesn't do to be mechabed Shabbos, oz tisanag al Hashem. The einig that a Yid has on Shabbos from Baburim, Mislov, Dogim, and the Matamim and the Madanim, everything that the Zmiris describes, that becomes HaKadosh Baruch Hu's einig. Think about it. The benefit of our physical pleasure is Tisanag al Hashem, that Kivyachol we're creating a spiritual einig for the Eibishter himself. So I'm looking at this and I'm saying, there's something about the Derech Avodah over here, which is pure Chassidus. Pure Chassidus. So I was struck and I began to think about a couple of things. Thing number one, Keneged Ababonim, comes the Ben Chochem. Chochem Ma'oim Ma'idus V'achukim. Tell me about the mitzvahs from Pesach. And what is the Haggadah going to tell you to do? Af atem elok hilchos HaPesach. Ein maftirin ach HaPesach afikaymen. What happened to the mitzvahs hayom? You're supposed to eat matzah and moror. What is it? Daled kaises. You didn't say anything about that. The only thing we're talking about is Ein maftirin ach HaPesach afikaymen. What does that mean? Next thing. Everybody knows, we teach this to our children in kindergarten, that the Seder, Pesach at night, follows a list of simonim. One of them is Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch is eating a meal. So what do you say? We say it in Yiddish. Kaddish for the Tata Kimta. What do you say about Shulchan Aruch? Shulchan Aruch, you say, Me'es Asudus Yantiv. Me'es Asud L'Kovid Yantiv. You have to eat the soup anyways. What is about Shulchan Aruch that is Pesach thing? Why is this a Pesach simon? I have to share a story from the Hedlik Baal Shem. I heard this from my father. I remember hearing this in school in Nachat-Tamimim in Pittsburgh. One of my rabbis said over this story. The Hedlik Baal Shem had an opportunity that he asked. Shaul he asked in the upper spheres, who is going to be my neighbor in Gan Eden? And he was given an answer, a particular name in a faraway location. Baal Shem says, I got to find out who this guy is. He's going to be my next door neighbor there. So he traveled over there, and he finds this Yid, and he talks to him, and he doesn't see any madrigas at all. What's going on with him? Who is he? By who did you learn? He says, I never learned anything. I can read in the Siddur. That's the maximum. I never learned anything. And the Baal Shem is trying to figure out, and he sees that this guy is eating. And in one sitting, for a meal, he can eat enough food for 12 people. And he says, why do you eat like that? So the man says to him, Rebbe, I want to tell you something. My father was a Meshoris who worked for the local poets. And he was a small, frail little man. And the poets one day says, everybody who works for me has to convert to my faith. He says, my father refused to do it. He's going to shmat, give me a break. He refused to do it. He was burnt at the stake, publicly. He says, my father's body was so small and frail that he burnt up in an instant. He says, I saw that, and I made a promise to myself. If I am ever going to get burnt at the stake, the fire will be so big that the smoke is going to go all the way up. So the Baal Shem made the observation, that is a shochan for me. Every morsel of food that this man ate was l'shem shamayim, to be mekadosh shem shamayim. This is a fundamental tenet of Chassidus, that we use the physical to achieve the spiritual. I realized when you're talking about Pesach with Afikomen, what is one of the halachas about Afikomen? We eat Afikomen at the end of the meal. Why? It's Keneged Korban Pesach. It's our substitute for Korban Pesach, which is Nechal al Hasoiva. In order to be Mekayim the mitzvah of Korban Pesach, it has to be the last thing of the meal that you're eating. So the Shulchan Aruch, the Suda of which is L'Kovid Yantiv. Nobody says it isn't. Of course it is. But it's accomplishing a Pesach-dik need, because it's allowing you to be able to eat the Korban Pesach or the Afikomen al hasoiva when you are already satiated. That's the tshuva to the Ben Chacham. He's not asking what the mitzvahs are. He knows the mitzvahs. He's a Chacham. He's asking, how do you do this mitzvah? How do you do the mitzvahs of Pesach in the best way possible? And you say, the halacha from Afikomen, that you do all your other achila before, so that the Afikomen is nechal al ha'sayva. The Frierdiker Rebbe is quoted as having said that the Baal Shem HaKadosh taught us that there is a derech avodah of using Olam Hazeh in order to achieve the madregas that bring us to Olam Haba. The Alter Rebbe taught us how to do it. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Tzion. And coming now, maybe the highlight, and that is the Frierdiker Rebbe writes that the nigging of the Alter Rebbe is sending upon a pidyon nefesh to the Alter Rebbe. So we, the Tza'im of the Alter Rebbe, are now soon going to sing the nigging of the Alter Rebbe, and by doing that, we are sending upon to Hadich to the Alter Rebbe. Before that, we are going to do the Siyum on the Shulchan Aruch and the Haschol of the Shulchan Aruch, and then we will do the nigging of the Alter Rebbe. For the Siyum on the Shulchan Aruch, I'm going to call upon a wonderful gentleman. He's a Rav in our community. He is a Dayan in our community. He's one of the Tza'im of the Alter Rebbe, Rav Shlomo Segal, and he is going to make the Siyum of the Alter Rebbe on Shulchan Aruch. Rav Shlomo Segal, please.
Mit 59 Jahren zurück, Tafshin Chof Gimel, hat der Rebbe in der Verbringung von Chof Dalet Teves gemacht das Siyum auf Shulchan Aruch. Und der Rebbe hat gesagt, dass wir sehen in dem Siyum von Shulchan Aruch, sieht man, der Scheiches von dem Siyum, von dem Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch zu dem ganzen Chiddush, was der Alter Rebbe hat ausgegeben in Tanje. Und ich sage, das Mamesh in dem Siyum, was bei der Goche Prot ist, der Siyum, was der Alter Rebbe in Messiah Shulchan Aruch in Ilchos, Sheilus, Kirus und Chassino mit der Samach, ist der Siyum, sagt man Mamesh, der größte Chiddush, was sie da in Tanje. Weil ich jetzt lehne in dem Siyum und ausbringen, mehr nicht wie eine Kudes, ist sehr spät, was ist der Scheiches, wie man sieht, der Chiddush, was der Alter Rebbe geht aus in Tanje. Der Alter Rebbe ist Messiah in Seif Lamed, Porois am Alchis al Tvue, das heißt Behemes, ein Mensch hat Behemes, und sie gehen auf die Tvue. Nicht der Fall, was der Balabos von die Behemes oder der Balabos von die Feld hat gewollt, als die Behemes sollen da sein auf die Tvue, machen eine Dische. Nur die Sibbe, was sie gehen, sagt der Alter Rebbe, ist lefi, sheyorat loem aderech, Poshet, sie dürfen kommen zu einem zweiten Feld. Und zu mekatzert sein, die Weg, gehen sie durch ein zweites Feld, aber nicht bekavone auf jenem Feld zu machen dort die Dische. Ist ein Neuover, alloi sagst du im Chosman. Agam, als sie da ist so, bis als Beime geht auf Truhe, und sie wird eine Dische, und doch da ist so, von alloi sagst du im Scheur bei Dische, ist aber in dieser Fall, ist nicht over auf Nisu, a viele hat Chesem gewesen. Verwas, afal pi, שהתבואה נידושה מאלה, זה הזכר הזר, עד התבואה ותבר נידוש, weil הבהמה, mit dem Mischkal von Behema, geht der Ruf auf Tvue, ist sicher sein, ein Ingen von Dische, wir reden nicht wegen Ziegen, wir reden wegen Behema, so es geht der Ruf auf Tvue, doch sicher sein Dische, ist doch dort ein Ingen von Dische, für was mega Chesem sein, und für was sie nicht auf dem Kinissa, Oil ve'einem miskava. Also wie hat nicht kein Kavone, sein Kavone doch nicht gewesen, das sein die Tvue. Sein Kavone gewesen, Poshet umkommen zu einem zweiten Feld, und die Feld ist Poshet, nennt zu kommen zu jenem Feld. Ist also hat nicht gehabt in Kavone, ist nicht über. Vechein kol kayetze beze. was der Dienst von Noruch בעצם איתו, der Rebbe Tzachim gestellt, der Sicher von der Schotzeit, gefragt Scheiles in Igle, und ich da reingehen in dem, der Rebbe gefragt, als Scheile, was den Scheile gebracht, als von dem alten Rebbe setzt man dort in die Kude von der Kiddush von Tanja. Die Scheile ist, der alte Rebbe sagt, wer kein Kol zu Kayoitzi bozen, meint das, aber der Dien von einem Miskaven ist der Dien in alle Yisurim, nicht nur in dem Dien von Chassime, es ist auch der, so sagen, als sie nur bei Chassime. Aber der alte Rebbe sagt nicht das, der alte Rebbe sagt, wer kein Kol Kayoitzi bozen. Das heißt, dass in alle Yisurim von Teire, Baid macht der Yisur und hat nicht kein Kavon in dem, ist nicht over. Die Scheile ist da, lechur ist doch da Dien, als die Psygreische, ist viele da, was sagt, als eine Miskaven ist Portus, bei Psygreische, ist Jochai, ich weiß, eine ganze Bier von Reben, Masber sein, für was ich das nicht gestiere zu dominieren, mit nicht reingehen und der. Aber die Scheile, was der Rebbe gefragt, wie ist das, am Iset, der Psa-Ingen Niflo, in Isurim, Tomer, du machst on Kavone, bist du nicht über Kinisu. Aber du tust eine Mitzwe und du hast nicht in Kavone, steht das in der Loche ist, Mitzwe sind nicht in Kavone. Aber viele, du hast nicht in Kavone, bist du Mekayim am Mitzwe. Lechaire, weil doch gedacht sein verkehrt. A Mitzwe ist Mechaber Adovor Gashmi mit Neberschen. Weil doch gedacht sein eine von Kavone. Ein Mensch ist doch nicht verbunden mit dem Neberschen. Ist gedeh, soll werden verbunden mit dem Neberschen, dafür auch in Kavone. Und da sagt man, eine verkehrte Sache. Aber Schaß, mir hat Benegea zu einer Mitzwe, ist viel ohne Kavone, ist Mekayim am Mitzwe. Nicht nur, wenn ein Mensch auch nicht kein Kavone, aber viele mit diesem Käufe. Die Gemara sagt, dass Kofur wo auch al Matzo, ist Mekayim die Mitzwe von Matzo. Sie da adin, dass viel ein Mensch verliert am Atbea, und Oni hat das gefunden, hat בכלל nicht gehabt, die Machshove, nicht, dass gehabt der Kavone, nicht hat gefallen gehabt der Machshove, viele Kemeise nicht gewesen. Hat verloren am Atbea, und Aid hat gefunden der Matbea, und was darf sagen, ist Mekayim am Mitzwe, und wird Zafse Bechibur mit den Neberschen, viele hat nicht getan, die schon Meise nicht getan haben. Und bei Isurim sagt man Punkt verkehrt. Aber Schaß hat nicht gekavone zu machen ein Isur, ist nicht über auf ein Isur. Und der Rebbe gesagt, dass dort Drik Zachoi ist der ganze Ringen, was der Rebbe ist Mechadesh in Tanje, als Aid ot Neshome, was ist Achele Kelokam im Al Mamesh, und mit Zad die Neshome ist viele, wenn mit Zad der Nefesh Abraham ist auch nicht gekavone, aber die Pnimies von dem Rotzen von jeder Rieden ist Mekayim sein Teuro Mitzvahs. Und mit der Rambam passt das Benegea zu Aget, aber ich hasse darf sein der Zöhner, ist im Käfer, hat sie immer Reuzani, und das heißt, dass sie da rotzen, weil sie wird nicht gale, der Pnimies rotzen von Aiden. Ich beschaß mir anderen wegen der Mitzvah. Was Aid dort an Neshome? Was ist Achele Kelokam im Al Mamesh? Ist Agam, als rot nicht in Kavone, und verkehrt kann doch sein, als rot der Kavone aufhieß, aber sein Pnimies der Kavone ist doch die Kavone zu Mekayim seiner Mitzvah. Ist der Pfarrer, dass viele überhaupt nicht gekavone, jemals ist Mekayim die Mitzvah. Wie so bei Amiret Benegea zu Ayin von Isur, Aid dort gescheiches nicht mit Isur. Kedea, wir soll sagen, als Aid soll auch mal scheiches mit der Isur. Dafür oben darf gar Kavone zu dem. Aber als es eine Miskaben, ist nicht über Kishum Isur. Und das ist, wir sagen, sein mit der kurzen Meise, was wir gehört, von Abiel kann, was wir zerhalten im Status sein, in die Jahren früher, in dem Kinnusim von den Azäzאים und vielleicht Chazern und Sichas von Reben, hat einmal übergegeben am Meise, was wird erzählt, als Schliches, wie man sagt, ein Schliches von Reben, ist in Zeiten von alten Reben sehr gewesen, in Jahren von Schliches. Es sind nicht gewesen, die Schliches auf zu legen viel mit ihnen und machen eine koschere Stub. Aber sie gewesen Schlicher, es vorstellt Mekare sein, Chsidim und viele Diva sind nicht Chsidim zu Chsides. Ich gewesen eine von den Schluchim, geißen Rableib. Und Rableib hat gehabt, kam Talmudim. Einer von den Talmudim, ich gewesen ein Talmud, was hat belangt zu anderen Chsides, und ist Skar geworden zu Rableib. Und Rableib hat mit ihm gelernt, Marmorim von alten Reben, Kuteteira, zu Tanje. Der Talmud, vielleicht seine Chavere, schäppen sich mit ihm und gesagt, der alte Rebbe sagt sehr mehr dicke Teres. Aber Moifsim gefindet man in andere Rebbes, in andere Chazeres, gefindt man größere Moifsim. Dort der Rebbe gewesen allemal mit die Schitte, machen was weniger Moifsim. Wir soll sehen, Elikus in Welt. Weil schon wie gewinnt die Schitte, als sie soll sein, was mehr Moifsim. Dort der Rebbe hat doch gebracht, dass wir soll sehen, der Ingen von der Ewigste wegen in Welt. Aber es hat ihm sehr gebadet, was mit ihm gechappt, aber er hat keine Sachen nicht gesagt zu seinem Melamed. Es war über eine Zeit, vielleicht der Melamed, vielleicht der Schliach, schicken zu dem alten Rebbe mal durch. Und der alte Rebbe hat gemacht, nicht mehr gesehen auf die Duches. Einmal hat der Rebbe geschrieben, auf dem Duch, bei der Namen von dem Talmid, als Kedailis Anien, in der Matze von dem Talmid, וזה אי אלוהי לאויס ולאחרים למויפס. Der Schliach hat reingerufen dem Talmid und hat gefragt, was sich mit dem, wie geht es? Und hat gar nicht gewohnt sagen. Hat gewiesen, weil der Rebbe schreibt. Sagt Reb Leib, du darfst doch mal größere Moifes von dem. Hat verstanden, als der Rebbe hat gehabt sein Machschover und geschrieben einen Brief. Sagt nicht wegen dem rede ich. Darfst doch mal größere Moifes von dem, was Ada Joim ist dein Kopf noch verstanden, Amach Livkor, aber Chameir, Schneimer sind Betales. Ein verstehst du, was eine Schome von Aiden ist, was der Rebischter ist, darfst nicht doch mit den größeren Moifes von dem. Okay.
Now we are going to make the Haschole on the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch. We're going to call an individual, a wonderful individual in our community, Rabbi Michael Zellickson, who is the son of the legendary, the Refe of the Rebbe, the Avram Zellickson, who was one of the Tzatzoyim of the Alter Rebbe. Rabbi Michael Zellickson, please.
The scholar, the Alter Rebbe begins the Shulchan Aruch is Yehuda ben Temeimer, ואז כנומר, כנסר, רץ כצבי, וגיבר כארי, לאסס ויצאין אביך שבשמיים. Der Alter Rebbe teigt stuis, as כנומר ist, als ich mich schämen mit bnei Adam amaligim, giber kari ist ikar hagvure hu belev, visgaber al yitzchel lenatche, giber am esgaber al sene, lapili loretz, und als darf jeder Jid sich stellen mit der Starkheit al yitzrei, kari lokom bishinosei, keide meira beke, lavedas beirei, כדי שיהי הוא מאירר השחר, ושתית עיר השחר, אני מאירר השחר, כתוב dem שחר, ואין השחר מאיר איסי, וזו מידה בינניס. Stellt sich der Rebbe in der Sicher, als die erste Sache, sagt man, es ist ein Schinui, als der alte Rebbe bringt, dass sie von Madure Basra, die zweite Madure von dem Shulchan Aruch, die der alte Rebbe heit dann mit Yehuda ben Temeimer. Fragt der Rebbe die Scheile, wie bald er durch doch nie, durch der Sefer von Haloches, ich wusste der Negier schreiben, wer hat es gesagt. Okay, da mein Chazal, ich da der Mondmann, wer das sagt es, aber der ich sei in Tour, sagt der Rebbe, was schenken bin ich zu dem Minja. Die Nekude bringt der Rebbe Ruiz, der Linie von Yehuda ben Temeimer, das ist der Ronny von dem Shulchan Aruch, weil das ist die Linie von Halacha von Kol HaTeira Kula. Sagt man, dass es Yehuda ben Temeimer, der Zugang zu der Minja von Limud ist, das hat sich auch mit Yehuda, mit der Minja von Bittel. Yehuda durch Hanomen Apam Eides Hashem, ist gedeiht soll sein ein Ingen von Hagdome, gedeiht soll sein Namen Teire, Punkt wie mit es genommen bei Matten Teire, gewinnt Nase Benishma, sie gewinnt Kadmisi po Meichel und Neichel, also im gesagt früher Nase und noch Nishma, das ist der Seder von Limud HaTeira, der erste sagt, das sein der Ingen von Eide, der Ingen von Heido, der weglegen sich, geht jetzt lernen, Teirossi, Shalkodesh Baruch. Und noch ist auf Besaß lernen, kann doch sein, als mitten im Besaß lernen wird zukommen ein Jahr von Jesus, Metzios, Kechi Beizem Yodi, hat Mechadisch gewähnt, hat sehr viel gelernt, hat sehr viel getan in dem. Der Fall ist bei Worten Manechet Ben Tema. Ben Tema sagt der Rebbe, dass auch der Reine besagt Ben Chedin. Also wird angerufen Ben Chedin, am Metzios von Chedin. Also sagt Ben Tema, also da wissen, als alles was sagt, dass der Rotzen von dem Eberschen, der Divri Hashem, das sind nicht eigene Werte, das sind Dware, Asher Sandri, der Ficha, das ist der Eifung von Limud HaTeira. Und damals damals ist Matzliach in der Minion von dem Dateira und damals das ist der Dome auf dem ganzen Indien von der Limud Mevili de Meise. Bald als vom Wand nimmt dem Keach, also so wissen, als alles was sagt, das war Hashem, wie der Ruf was bei ihm, bei weiß, als Zachilik, Elika, Memal Mamash, die bemele weiß, als nicht kommuniziert, was sich, nur der Zinner, durch welche die Unionen von Dvar Hashem, reden sich Haruis von ihm. Der Rebbe sagt beim Loschen, es redet sich Haruis von ihm. Das ist der Linie vom Thema. Und noch ein Frage stellt sich der Rebbe, in der Weite, die sich wenn ich gehe, der Linie von Askan Nomer, weil das meint ein Tiger. Fragt der Rebbe, der alte Rebbe allein sagt, in der zweiten Ort, aber man soll nicht mehr keiner sein in sich, in Jonen Midas, was einen Schalei, Liegis, Asponim, a viele Schalei, Bemokem, Abidosi. Soll nicht keiner sein, das benafsche. Sie war sehr, was darf er wissen, was sie da der Askan Nomer, dass sie da so Metzies von der Nomer. Der Rebbe bringt von die Gemorre in Nerven, am Alfeine bei Behemoth Oretz. Am lernen zu gehen von die Behemoth Oretz, das ist am lernen zu gehen von Behemoth und Chayes, wie die Gemorre sagt, in Nerven, als il Molin lit Notera, und wie der Rebbe nicht mal sagen, dass er zugelegt im Wort Chas Visholim, il Molin lit Notera Chas Visholim, o Yino Lemedim, it's Nius, Mochossul und Gezel Minemola, als da in Jonen, was man kann sich von sich ablernen. Fragt der Rebbe, aber wenn es kommt zu der Minion von Nomer ist doch am Masik, ist geht da in der Welt, und wie sagt Nomer, weiß es auf eine von Asus. So der Rebbe, die Gemorre sagt, als zu wissen, als da Gimel Asin hein, einer von sie ist Yisroel, Shabuumes, seinen Asin Shabuumes. Ich bemeile, Punkt, wie sie da Asin in einer negativen Neifen, ist sicher da Asin in einer Neifen von Kedusha. Und der Rebbe bringt von der Gemorre in Shabbos, also beschaß es redet sich wegen der Masel Madin, ein Mann, die Israelit, was sie geboren geworden, aber es nimmt die Zeit, ist oder kann sein ein Rezeach, oder kann sein ein Reifer. Weil wir bald haben, dass sie doch die jene Zeit verbunden mit den von dann. Ich verstand, man kann das wissen, zum Dafke in einer guten Neifen, in einer Linie von Asien, in einer Neifen von Kedusha. Wir sagen, mit ein paar kurze Sipurim, wenn ich gehe zu meinen Taten, was ich habe gehört von meinen Tatenmesser von den Jahren, wenn ich gehe, wo der Rebbe hat den Mund, einige verbunden mit den Chassene sein und einige verbunden noch sein Ptira. Also ich gewinne von der Chassene, ich gewinne Topschen Judbei, es sind in Jahren 70 Jahre. Chaneke, der Rede Chaneke, der Rebbe gab das in jene Zeiten, als es nur einer was trockt an Bord, der Rebbe mit Sadi Kedushin, einer was an Bord, und die frühe Schekel. Sie gewinnen verschiedene Knäuel, jeder paar Jahre gewinnen andere Knäuel. Mein Tate damals kein Bord nicht gehabt, ich gewinne ein Doktor von Europe, und doch nicht getrunken kein Bord. Aber der Rebbe, später habe ich es gehört, ich meine, wir reden da, war mich in den letzten Jahren noch begehrt, im Sipo von Rabbi Fuchs, all was sollen, als der Rebbe gefragt hat, Schmule Wittin, was gewinnt von der Signe Arabonim, und gewinnt ein kluger Jid, und der Rebbe hat ihm gefragt, als sie erkennt gehen, es hat die Kedushin sein, wie bald, als macht das Nein, es ist ein Minig und es ist ein von Leder. Hat Rav Shmuel gesagt, dass da ist jetzt mal klar zwei Sachen. Erstens, nicht zum Wochen in Yeshiva. Das ist gewähnt klar von der Woche in Yeshiva. Ist in Kumet da, ist schon gewähnt von Shanghai, ist schon gewähnt Jahren älter wie eine Woche in Yeshiva. Und die zweite Sache, der Chakorim mit dem Rebbe. Alleine kommt. Der Rebbe gefragt, aber das Pane Maga hat sich angegeben 10 Säge bei Nacht. Wir haben die Mechanike Geld 8 Säge und 10 Säge bei Nacht. Eine zweite Gelegenheit, ich bin noch sein Tiere in 33 Jahren zurück mit dem Test. Und der Rebbe damals, ich gefragt beim Rebbe, sie müssen abdrucken, ich wollte abdrucken, Millionen von Tieren, von was mein Tate geschrieben. Und der Rebbe geschrieben, Kehle, Lai, Stalschulus, Adad, Murazoki. Und sie rechnen alle Deres bis in Alten Rebbe. Das ist noch stolz auf alle Lied. Ein paar Wochen später, wenn ich gefragt wegen der Matzeva, hat der Rebbe gesagt, dass der selber für sich von dem. Wir rechnen alle Deres auf der Matzeva. Also ich sage, wenn sie mir rechnen tuis der Shishi, oder mir rechnen tuis die Deres. Und dann gefallen alle Deres, sagt der Rebbe, alle Deres ist rechnen. Das ist, dass ich bin eine Linie von den Männern alle Deres. Auch obwohl ich mit Messiaen sein mit der Linie, was ich denke, dass ich da von der Pupkos mispoche, ist, weiß was ich da, wie ist da? Akoponim, einmal habe ich getroffen mit Mordechai Duber, Pupko, Jorgen zurück, hat mir erzählt damals die ganze Meise von dem Segen sein, im Rav Meshel, Tversky Schneerson, Und dort hat erzählt ein Wort, der Rebbe hat gesagt, dem Tatenseherin, also der Rebbe gesagt, es wird gar nicht helfen, als der Loschen, als verfallen. Die Kinder haben schon im alten Lebensblut in sich. Ich bemeile, also bleibt das. Sag Kolpanien, eben so helfen haben, wir sollen das alle wissen nutzen, mit der Leben von Asus, die Dusche, mit der Charcholle.
Ja, Shekeach, und als Menschen, Shekeach haben wir Michel, von dem Sium, von der Scholle und von den Sipulim. Und we're going to make we're going to sing the Nigunim Achone, which are Achone for a Pidya Nefesh to the Alter Rebbe. I can only remind you, and I hope you take it well, that we need everyone to sing. The Achone is not that they only should sing, they sing Baruch Hashem so wonderfully, but it means that all of us sing together with them, the three Nigunim, the Nigun, the Achone, the Malnareb's Nigun, and the Shulitzi Chlotzi. Thank you very much. We're going to bench and we have a Sheva Blachas of Tza'atzoim. Before that, I want to remind you, take with you a folder. That's the Chalukah of the Malten Leben Shulchan Aruch. You have it in the back of the room, and you will be one of the Mishtatvim in the learning of the Malten Leben's Shulchan Aruch. I also want to mention a wonderful gentleman who used to come to the Tza'atzoim every year. Harav Bavlo Michoel ben Yankiv Shimshon Halevi, Flint. Unfortunately, this year he's no longer with us. His Yotzeit is soon Chovov Tevis. Yezochet Letev, Olav Bavlo Michael Ben Yankov Shimshon Halevi from the Tzatzoim of the Alter Rebbe, and his Yotzeit is Chovov Tevis. It should be a good and better for his wife, for his children, for his grandchildren, for his great-grandchildren, for everything. Thank you very, very much for coming. Yes? Say this again. The B'Yael is here. Thank you very much. We are going to bench Emil Hashem. Thank you for coming. Next year, Emil Hashem, it's going to be in Yerushalayim Milakedesh with the Rebbe and the Alter Rebbe, Gesundheit und Freilichkeit. You still have something to serve. We're not running away. We're here to serve. Thank you very much. Seid gesund. We are going to bench. Thanks very much. Next year in Yerushalayim Milakedesh, and we don't have to wait a whole year. The Rebbe Nishmat Satan says, Lashon Abov Yerushalayim, by next year we'll be in Yerushalayim, but it should be Gesundheit und Freilichkeit, Tekef und Miyad, Mamish.